Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. I, like many others, grew up watching an early morning TV show here in Australia called Cheese TV, in which they would play episodes from different cartoons and the occasional anime. Now, my younger brain didn't understand what anime was, and I just enjoyed the show where a young boy went around collecting the cute animals, and the other one where the muscly men beat the ever-living shit out of each other. The pain of having to wait for the next episode, along with some of the early days of DBZ's more notorious pacing issues, made it a bit tricky to always keep up with the story. So often, we would turn to the video game adaptations in order to know what had happened or what was going to happen next. As I may have mentioned in my video on the Legacy of Goku series, there were some hit or miss DBZ titles around, one of the best series of games being the Budokai games. And since I currently am on a massive Dragon Ball kick, I thought why not have a little bit of a look back at one of my all-time favourite PS2 titles, Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Being a 3D fighter in the vein of something like Tekken, rather than having a free-flowing 360 degrees of movement, the combat takes place in a softlock 2D plane while allowing for side steps in order to dodge. Mechanically, Budokai isn't quite on the same level as a series like Tekken, not that you would expect it to be. However, what we do have access to is enough to challenge a player in order for them to be able to get good with what's on offer. There's definitely the ability to gain some skill when it comes to the overall combo system and special moves, but it is important to note the game doesn't really reward button mashing, at least outside of the clash moments. My only real complaint when it comes to the combat system itself is the inconsistency of some of the special moves when it comes to their inputs and their animations, but more on those animations in a bit. There'll be certain moves that require you to hit forward and kick at the same time, then two individual kicks, then forward and kick again, followed by an energy attack. When I'm doing this, sometimes it just doesn't seem to come out. I feel like I'm doing it right, but the game doesn't tell you how fast you need to input the combo. You see, for some fighting games, they want you to input that combo within a certain time frame, while others require you to do it based on animation. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what the hell Budokai wants. And I know it's a skill issue. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm great at every fighting game. I'm better than most of my friends, but not good enough to play against anyone who actually practices. In any other fighting game I've played, I've been able to figure out the combo system and the special moves, but Budokai does leave me feeling a bit frustrated in certain points, as some moves I just could not get to come out for the life of me. Now, it's not all bad, as most of these, such as the Kamehameha, are pretty easy to get out, along with basically every other character's signature move. It is important to note though, for this video I played the NTSC version of the game, and the reason why I bring this up is because the NTSC and PAL releases are slightly different. For the most part, it's the exact same game, however, there are slight differences when it comes to translation, along with that of presentation. Where Budokai really fumbles, outside of some poor translation choices, such as the Kaioken being the Kinkai Fist, even though I don't really hate Kinkai Fist as a name for the attack, is the fact some of these signature moves are really poorly animated. The most egregious mistake within the game, though, is Goku's Kamehameha being yellow instead of its traditional blue. It's not every character that suffers from it, but the fact that Goku, the face of the franchise, is the one that has this issue makes it really frustrating. It screams lack of polish. The worst example is Goku having an attack known as the continuous Kamehameha, but in reality it's just a regular volley of ki attacks, and this is an animation that gets reused for pretty much every character, even if the attack has a different name. Another major fumbling point, though not something I technically hate within the context of the game, is the lack of balancing for some of the special moves. There are certain ones, such as the instant teleportation Kamehameha, that are absolutely devastating, while something like Special Beam Cannon is a little underwhelming to say the least. With all that said, that's pretty much the end of my major complaints when it comes to the game as a whole. The only other issue that I could see people having, and I can agree with, is the fact that the game's story mode is arguably too short. I don't mind shorter campaigns in fighting games though, as realistically I'm going to be playing with friends or against bots in its arcade mode. In Budokai's case, it's the World Tournament mode. You're going to be spending more time in this, more so than worrying about the story, in which Budokai gets all the way up to the end of the Cell Saga, but the only issue is it skips pretty much every fight on your initial playthrough, meaning after you finish the story the first time, you have to go back into the story missions and find the ones you haven't done. It would have been nice to have been able to just do all these missions in order and then do the what if scenarios at the end, and sadly we lose a lot of DBZ's charm here because things get boiled down to single lines or cutscenes basically saying, "And then the heroes won because Goku kicked the villain's ass." Where Budokai really begins to pull ahead of pretty much every other Dragon Ball Z game at its release was its presentation. Visually, you could argue this is the best, at its point in time, any Dragon Ball game had looked. especially in 3D. The character models themselves were well detailed, well voiced, and all the combat is really well animated, even if they did reuse some of those animations. It actually reminds me a lot more of the early days of Dragon Ball Z and even the old Dragon Ball when it comes to the fights, because Z is kind of known for having those blurry line fights more so than the choreographed fights we used to get. It doesn't really convey the same sense of speed that we would expect, but it's done in a way that makes it feel more like what the fighters themselves would be seeing. Also, I'm a big fan of the music and the sound effects. The music absolutely rips, and the sound effects sound like they're straight out of the anime. And as a fan, I really couldn't ask for much more. What helps separate Budokai from a lot of other fighting games is its use of a capsule system, allowing for you to have custom versions of your own characters as long as those capsules are usable with that specific character. So as an example, you're not exactly going to be able to put Super Saiyan on Hercule. For the most part, this won't ruin the game's already not so great balance, as each of these capsules will have a specific use case and requirement in order to make the most of them. In order to get new capsules, you have two options. Play the story mode, which will net you a certain handful and very specific capsules, or do what is most likely expected of you and play in the tournament mode to earn Zenny. With that Zenny, you can then purchase capsules from Mr. Popo, making this possibly one of the earliest examples of loot boxes in gaming. It can definitely get a little bit grind heavy towards the end if you're trying to fill out all the capsules, but given the fact the game has a suggested purchase which won't double you up, it does have a solution for its own issues. We also get access to a pretty decent roster of characters, with there being over 20 that are playable, even though a few of them are just different versions of Gohan. But overall, given the time period in which this game takes place for the series, it's pretty much the roster I would expect to see, with only really Master Roshi being the obvious character that's left out. Well, at least to me. I've always enjoyed his character, not so much the pervy side, but just that of the wise master who's a bit of a goofball. But you take these 20 playable characters and you add in that customizability that I mentioned before with the capsule system, and all of a sudden you have something truly special. I wouldn't call Budokai one of the greatest fighting games of all time, let alone one of the best DBZ fighting games, even if it is one of my favorites. It definitely has its issues. I would say though that it raised expectations. It set a new baseline for the franchise going forward when it came to its video game formats, and I would say for the most part they've definitely stuck to it. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this look back at Dragon Ball Z Budokai. It was definitely fun to go back and play it, even if it's a little bittersweet since we did lose Akira Toriyama, in which I do want to say thank you to him, and may he rest in peace. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button. If you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi from $1 a month, like these lovely people here. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.